Hello guys, I'm Super Ron, welcome back to the G-Unit and welcome to episode 23 of my GBS Zero build. Last week we were doing some bits and pieces over by the sticker wall starting to build up the cylinder head because the engine that's been in the chassis is only a mock-up engine, it's only an empty shell. All our actual engine was off at the machine shop getting all bits machined out and faced up. And now it's all back, we've been building that up over there. But we had to stop last week because as I was assembling the cylinder head, I found that all the collets had loads of little cracks in, which was really strange. I haven't seen that before. But I ordered some new ones that never arrived so we could crack on with that. But while we were away, I was thinking of a few other things that I'd like to do with the cylinder head just to double check before I assemble it all up. And one of those is to test the inlet manifold off the throttle bodies onto the cylinder head. Because as you saw in the last episode, the cylinder head has had lots and lots of work done to it and the inlet ports are absolutely massive. So I just want to check that there's no big step between the manifold and the head. And if there is, we'll grind these out to match so it'll all be the perfect flow. So that'll just aid flow into the head even better. One other thing, while we were away this week, I spotted something really cool on eBay. I've got a bit of a collection of spark plug covers now for the red top engine. I've got the black one, I've got a couple of like the traditional red ones, and this is where the XE gets its red top name from the red top spark plug cover. And as I was just browsing for other XE bits, I found this really cool and really rare QED spark plug cover. It's a proper alley one with the raised letters, so it's all cast as one. And it's a really, really cool item. QED had been tuning Vauxhall engines before I even knew what an XE is. So I'm not sure whether I'll put it on the car because I haven't actually got anything QED on it. But I just thought it's a really cool spark plug cover that you never see anywhere. So for now I'll put it on, but for the final build, I reckon this is going to turn into a nice bit of wall art. So for now, we've got the collets. I want to check the manifold, so let's get back over to the sticker wall. In the last episode, we got the cylinder head all cleaned up, we got the valves lapped in, and we got everything spotless, all the oilways and waterways blown out, and everything cleaned up so it's clinically clean. We got all the valves and the springs and everything all cleaned up spotless, so we were all ready to go, except for we found all these really strange cracks in the collets. Now, I'm still not quite sure what caused them. I don't know whether it's from heat or whether someone's fitted them badly before and bashed them in and cracked everyone. It's just really, really odd. But anyway, with the inspiration from my QED spark plug cover, I got in touch with QED and got a full set of brand new collets. So we are all ready to go forwards with the build. When I spoke to QED, I did ask for some stickers to go up on the sticker wall, but they didn't produce, so sorry guys, you've missed out, no space for you. But just before we do put all the valves in, I'm going to double check this inlet manifold onto the head to see how the ports line up, because it's going to be a lot easier to see with the valves out, because I can look through here and see if there's any step, because as you can see right through and it'll be a lot easier to see. Something cool that QED do that some of you might know, for the XE engine they do what's called direct-to-head throttle bodies. So with the Jenveys you've got the throttle bodies here, which are a pretty universal fit, and then you have a tailored inlet manifold to line up with the cylinder head. So these throttle bodies could be on a Ford, on a Vauxhall, on anything at all, and they just tailor the inlet manifold to suit. Whereas the QED ones are all bespoke, so these are spaced exactly for the red top head and they bolt directly on, which is really going to help us because some of the long-term watchers will know we've got to cut this inlet manifold, angle it up to clear the chassis, whereas if we had the QED direct-to-head ones, that would all go on. But unfortunately, budget doesn't allow for them. These are what we've got, so we're going to cut and shut these ones. So let's take these throttle bodies off and try the inlet onto the head. So that's the throttle bodies off and the inlet manifold onto the head. And you can see down there, there is a little bit of a lip where the two come together. Not much because they've both been ported out, but I just really would like to get rid of that lip, get them matched perfectly, just to get maximum flow and maximum efficiency in there. So this is the Jenvey inlet manifold. So like I said, the Jenveys have a universal throttle body setup. So these just come in twos and they're a set distance apart. Whereas the QED direct-to-head throttle bodies that I said about before are actually one-off throttle bodies and they bolt directly to the head. So that saves a lot of space. And that would be perfect for me because I need my throttle bodies to be a lot closer to the head and angled up. So here you can see the inlet manifold off again, and you can see here that the two faces aren't parallel, and that's because the flange on the head for the inlet is actually up at an angle. So when this is on, this is part of the age-old carburettor design, which needs the carburettors to be parallel with the floor, because if carbs tip up, the fuel falls out. So it's not a problem with fuel injection, but this is still the same age-old design that Jenvey used for their carbs, so they kept it for the throttle bodies as well. So the problem that I've got is my chassis rail is right here, right where it hits. So what I need is the throttle bodies to come up and straight out of the cylinder head and straight up. Now you can buy Jenvey manifolds, but again, that's a lot of money. So what my plan was, is to cut these off through each one, cut a wedge out, and then rotate it so this flange is parallel with this flange. Then the throttle bodies will be coming up like they're coming straight out of the cylinder head. Now, a bit of a problem with doing this is on one side of the where the cylinder head is, we've got this shape, and then on the other side, we've got the circle. So halfway down here in the casting, it forms from this shape to this shape. So when we cut it out, we are going to have a bit of a step. So I'm not really sure what to do, because it's got quite a curve, the distance from here to here and here to here. So I was going to cut a nice big wedge out here, rotate these round and weld it all back together. We've got a TIG welder here, so that's not a problem. All we need to do is learn how to TIG weld, which is also on my to-do list. But I'm just not sure about the best way to do it, because at this point here, if I do cut these off like that, put these on, that's going to make matching the ports really easy, because we're just going to be there and we can just file them out to suit. But I don't know if I want to cut this up and then it not work, because then I'll be left with nothing. If I had those lovely QED direct head throttle bodies that bolt straight on, would be up like this and that'd clear the chassis, no problem. But like I said in the manifold, this is a circle and this is it. So on the QED ones, this is actually formed the shape of the cylinder head, so it bolts straight on. So there is a lot of work that goes into the QEDs, which is why they are so expensive. So I even looked into if I could put this the other way around. But unfortunately, because it's got the waterways up one end and the shape of the ports, that's just not going to work. So what do we think? Shall we cut this now? And then that'll make facing up with this a lot easier. Or it's about 200 quid for a straight manifold. I don't know, decisions. Well, as you saw, decisions were made. Hopefully it won't be an expensive mistake, but I marked them out. On the inside curve, the shortest curve, I marked out the centre line from there and then went from each flange backwards. So I cut out each of these wedges. And then when this sits on there, line back up, we're not actually very far out at all. There's hardly any step. Once it's welded together, it'll just be a case of smoothing out those edges. There's enough material there to smooth it back in again. I think it's going to be an absolute success. So now they're parallel. So where it is grinded, it's not quite perfect. I would love to get this on a mill, get each one on a mill flat like that and go all the way across. So I do know a man with a mill, so we might get that on there because then they'll be exactly parallel and it'll be really nice to weld up because we'll have a nice flat edge all the way around. So I'm really excited about this. This has come out perfect. So now let's give it a little test fit. So before, the problem we had was these sat horizontal, and before you could get it bolted up, this hit on the chassis here. So now we've cut these out, so they're parallel to the head and they sit like this, which is absolutely perfect. That is going to be awesome. We've got so much room under here now. And also, the other thing I wanted to try and do was if I get shorter trumpets now, I can fit inside the bonnet. Because I didn't want to cut a big hole in the side with the sleek lines of the MNR body. So I think this has been an absolute success. This has paid up. So I'm going to get these flanges all nice and level so they're exactly parallel with these and the same with that. So then when they're welded together, that's going to fit in there absolutely perfect. So yeah, with some even, I could probably just about fit these trumpets inside the bonnet. It's close, but with some slightly shorter trumpets, they're all going to fit inside. So, he who dares wins. And now with this bolted back on, it's going to be a lot easier just to run a little Dremel down there and match the ports up. Wow, what a messy job that was, but so worth it. I didn't actually do much porting as such, it's more just matching the two together. So every time there's a high spot on one side or the other, that just knocked it down. So now there is no lip whatsoever. So now the air, the transition from the manifold to the cylinder head is seamless. So I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. We don't want it too smooth, we don't want it mirror finish on the inlet. But now they are matched perfectly, so there'll be no problems there. So that is pretty much as optimum as it gets. And all finished off. So happy with how it's come out. The transition between the inlet manifold and the cylinder head is now seamless. So I will be doing some more work in there because the two halves of the inlet manifold needs to be chopped back together and all welded up. So there's going to be a little step. So I'll do the same there between the two halves of the inlet manifold. But now this can come off. And I've just slipped the inlet on a standard head. And you can see how much bigger the ports are in the new head. the size of the step there to a standard head now, whereas this manifold is now perfectly port matched to the new head. Even at the top you can see there's a huge step there where the old injector bosses go, but we are going to be flowing some air. I'm super happy with how that's come out. The transition between the inlet manifold and the cylinder head is now seamless. So that's going to get optimum flow through there and just be really a good performer. So at the beginning I said there's two things that I was wanted to do before refitting the head, and the other one was to look at the cams, because these are very high lift cams, and what can sometimes happen, the lobes are so big that they actually catch on the side of the head, as they're much bigger than standard cams. So the cutouts where the standard cams normally go round, these ones can be so big that they hit the casting. So I'm just going to try these in, because I'd rather grind it all out now while it's still a bare head and we can clean it out nice and easy, rather than having it all fitted up and then having to strip it down again. So I'm just going to put all the cams in, bolt them down, and just check with a rotation that they're not going to touch anything. So that's the SBD camshafts all in. I've just nipped up the cam caps just so they're nice and in line, everything's oiled up. So because there's no valves in there, these should spin freely. The thing I'm watching out for is where these cutouts are for the standard valves. Sometimes when you get high lift cams, they can catch because they're quite a bit taller than a normal cam lobe. These are the SBD Motorsport cams, but they are for hydraulic lifters. So I'd have thought that would kind of limit how wild they are. And all this does look good. Does look like we're clearing everywhere. So that's just as expected. Let's just try the inlet. Ah, the inlet must be quite a bit bigger, because the inlet is hitting the casting as it comes around on a couple of cams. This one here. Wow, these are quite a bit more wild than I thought. Which is, of course, very cool. But I'm so glad I didn't assemble the head now, because to grind these out and clean it out, I would have had to strip everything off again. So while we're still in a bare head, I'm going to just get the power file out and just nip the ends off there so there's clearance for the cam to come around. They don't need a lot, but of course they can't touch. Right, let's get on with that. And that's the cams all bolted back in. It took me a couple of attempts because I was amazed how much I had to actually take off. If you look there when the cam lobes come down, but it is now clear. These just needed a little less, but all of them needed just a little bit off for the cam to go round. So these are quite impressive. And the exhaust side, that was all nice and clear anyway. So It is close, but it all clears. The other thing, if anyone's got one, I am going to need another Kent's Cams vernier pulley, because back in the Astra days we just needed one on the inlet cam where we drove with the XE inlet cam. Just had to go half a tooth, but for this I'm going to have to adjust both pulleys. So if anyone's got a blue Kent Cams pulley, early round tooth, let me know. But another job successfully done. So this episode's kind of taken a different turn to what I expected. At the beginning we were going to assemble this head and get it all together, but in fact we've done everything but. So I'm going to have to change the titles to should I cut up my throttle bodies? And the answer is most definitely yes. We're going to be sitting up here like this and this is going to work absolutely perfectly. It's brought them in closer to the head, it's angled them up away from the chassis rail, so everything we could have wanted it has done. So it was a gamble cutting up this manifold, but we've just got to weld it back together and it has paid off. So I'm really happy with that. And I'm also really happy, I just had that random thought to check if the high lift cams did hit the head, and lucky I did check, because I probably wouldn't have put the cams in until the engine was fully assembled with the head and block together and then put the cams in. So lucky I did check that. But now we are all free, both sides. Anyone that was wondering, they're SBD cams, the CMV 16V2 230 inlet, 220 exhaust, and the max lift on the inlet is 11.4 millimeters. So that's probably why it has got those huge lobes that are catching onto the castings. And the exhaust is slightly smaller at 10.6 millimeters. And the inlet's got a duration of 304 degrees and the exhaust is 298 degrees. So I couldn't actually find the code for these cams, but I spoke to SBD and they looked through their old catalogues. So these are quite old cams, but they look like they've had hardly any use and they're going to work perfectly for my build. So we haven't quite got done what we intended, but I hope you've still enjoyed it. So make sure you subscribe, because next time we are definitely going to be assembling this head. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure you give it a like, and if you want to see the rest of the kit cart, I've put it all in a playlist now, so you can watch episodes 1 all the way through to 23 all in one go if you're a bit bored one night. So I'm going to clean up, because this has been an absolute filthy episode, grinding aluminium, cutting aluminium, but it's all been for the best and I'm glad I've done it now. So the cylinder head does need a full clean and blowout, but then we can put it back together. So until next time, make sure you have fun.